Hi, I'm Matt.
And I'm Dean.
Welcome to another episode of the Real DMV, your backstage pass to all things film related in the DC, Maryland, and Virginia area.
Matt, I think we've tackled the idea of imposter syndrome in the past.
I live my life through that lens.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people do. I think a lot of new actors get into this and they're not quite sure of themselves. They feel like maybe this isn't for them because they just feel awkward doing it, right?
Yep.
And I know a lot of actors that have the day job, and some struggle with the Hollywood version of their day job.
Yeah,
have you ever experienced that at all? Or
Well, I'm very new to this. I know a lot of people who have, but I have my own personal battles with that. I still haven't 100% embraced the moniker "I'm an actor," So, I'm not there yet, and I think you've had that moment yourself.
I live in that,
Yeah.
But I'm getting used to it. And it took me a while to get to that point where I don't really feel like I'm trying to be somebody else. It's not my job,
Right.
but I feel a little more comfortable in my own skin doing it. It used to feel awkward, right? Portraying a different character or trying to be something that I wasn't. But now I live in that space now.
Yeah.
I can embody that character a little bit easier.
And I don't know that that's unique to the DMV. I think it takes on a different flavor here not because the jobs are more serious, but because we live in a political arena. We have a lot of people with high profile jobs, a lot of people that are in, very visible, highly visible professions that may feel, they don't want to reveal this side of themselves. So, I don't know. Again, I don't know that that's unique to this DMV area, but I want to believe it is because, you have a lot of government-centric stuff with people with, top secret clearances, for instance, things like that, things that we talked about before where they might not want to expose that side of themselves publicly. So, and, how do they navigate that? So.
Well, I remember seeing an interview with Tom Hanks where he said sometimes you just close your eyes and you just do the thing. You have an out-of-body experience because it does feel kind of awkward sometimes portraying a different character or doing something that, we've talked about it before. We've heard actors say, I would never do that.
Right.
But you're not you. You're the character you're portraying.
That's right.
And so I think our next guest has a unique perspective on this. Our next guest actually is an attorney. He'll tell us more about that. And so he's going to talk more about what it's like to be an attorney, what it's like to watch some of these programs and other actors maybe portray what he does in his day-to-day life, but the Hollywood version, right?
Yeah.
Have you ever seen that of yourself? I know you talk a lot about being a 25-year Marine, but have you ever watched a program? And
I have a hard time watching them. So I'm just like actors now say it's hard for them to watch movies because they dissect them.
Right.
It's hard for me to watch a lot of military films because, I dissect them and focus on all the things that I see that I wouldn't have done or that are wrong. And so, but talk more about this guest. Who do we have?
Yeah. Well, this next guest is someone that I'm familiar with, goes to the same coach that we do. We've mentioned her several times. I've been working with him for quite a while. We've done scenes together, and it's always a pleasure to speak with him. And it's a pleasure, even more so an honor, to have him on here today. Mr. MARC EMDEN.
Wow, thank you.
Yeah, appreciate you being
So
here.
nice.
Hold on, we got to give you the, there we go.
What is it?
Oh, do you have the headphones where you can't hear it?
Oh, I thought it's like my seat would vibrate or something. No. No.
That would be the fun version of that.
Yeah. That's a special seat. It's on order. So
But this is a family show, right?
It's
That's right.
for the most part. But we talked before this backstage about the idea that you're okay with us mentioning what you do for a living.
Yes. Yeah.
And it's interesting. You also mentioned there are people that that are kind of dismissive of what you do. They just don't understand. Talk a little bit about that in a minute after we kind of get through your humble beginnings. Are you from the DMV area originally?
Sure. I born and raised here. My was born and raised and lived in Wheaton, Maryland, which is not even referred to as a city anymore. It's more like a suburb of Silver Spring. My parents are both New Yorkers, and the idea of acting or being somebody other than who you were was never part of the fabric of our lives, although I was encouraged to to be irreverent and disrespectful in my household, which is another story, and I'm still working on that. But the idea being that that trying to be somebody else, or trying to not pretend, but to transport yourself to some other place, was really not part of the fabric of my home, and it took time for me to settle on that as some valid, interesting way to spend my time, and to embrace that and to be challenged by it. And that's one of the reasons I came upon acting.
So, and is it fair to say that, and I don't want to portray something that's not correct, so you let me know, but growing up, acting wasn't actively encouraged in the house, or did it come later, or was the seed sown then?
So my parents were, as I said, both New Yorkers. My father was a bartender before he had his real job, and they were both starstruck. So they would come home and fill us with stories of having met actors like John Garfield or Red Skelton, or sports figures who may have come into the bar, or talked about performances on Broadway of individuals that I had read about or seen, Yul Brynner in The King and I, and they would be so filled with excitement that they got to see that kind of imbued in me this feeling of wanting to be close to stars, or to see them and to study them and to know them, and to know what may have prompted them to do something a certain way.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's not unusual to run into some people here in DC sometimes and get starstruck, and I don't think that ever goes away. But was that ever something that they thought that you might take up? Was that something they saw in you early on, that maybe you had this ability to entertain?
Yes, so I was certainly encouraged to be a mimic, to make fun of people, to pretend to be somebody other than who I was, and to use voices and be ridiculous. That was encouraged in my household. So I guess in that way, it was a setup for me to at least try something to be much more public than my individual self. And I think that's what led me to going to law school, because I liked the idea of being put on the spot and having people judge my intellect or my verbal skills immediately was something that always attracted me to that. And then, but over time, the idea of acting didn't make sense to me. So, I mean, I did improvisational comedy for a number of years, and I thought that would be a way to entertain myself, or to do something that would be more expansive. And I found that really wasn't my cup of tea. I think that because I know a little bit more about improvisational comedy than I used to think that it would be filled with shtick, that to be clever and funny was part of improv. And it's not. It's the exact opposite. It's to be straight and serious. And in that way, it builds to something much more interesting. And so the segue from that seemed to be, where can I go and do something where I am sincere and I mean it, and have it land? And acting just seemed like a natural selection for me.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're a trial attorney,
Yes.
so is there, you would say, and to back up a little bit, some people know and some people don't, that I also went to law school. And when you're in front of a jury, or you're in front of a judge, or you're in front of just an audience, because the courtrooms are open, you are kind of putting on a public speech.
Persona.
You're exactly, and there's an air about that. So how did that translate when you decided to get into acting, and where did that begin? How similar are those veins?
Okay. Great question. And I skipped over that when you asked me before. So I would say that when you're in a courtroom, I mean, the goal is to convince. And that is the overriding goal that you have and are taught. So that seemed somewhat natural to me, that you study a body of information that you know is the law, and then you have either a decision maker, which could be the judge or it could be the jury, that you need to convince of the correctness of your position, or some factual situation. So I became trained early on that when you speak to a judge, that you have a certain certain delivery style that is going to be effective. And then you can use that on a jury where you have to decide how you're going to try to explain yourself. And then you mix all that up with there's a witness on the witness stand. So how do you coalesce the three of those? How do you talk to a witness to try to get them to tell a story that you think will be impactful or moving to the judge or the jury and still be connected to them, so you're not just sitting having a conversation with somebody and then you have these other people, the judge and jury, to the side. So there's a certain amount of mental gymnastics that goes into that, and I do believe I'm pretty natural at it, and I like the challenge of it. So it's like juggling three balls at a time and then trying to see how they land and then commenting on them when they do. And I think that's kind of how I stepped into this, if that makes sense.
Have you had to break yourself of any habits moving into the acting space that you find that you on the courtroom floor that don't lend themselves well or, to the acting piece or vice versa?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
So acting is a completely learned experience for me. I find that the idea of acting is sometimes like heavy lifting because there's a certain amount of fluidness, I think, that goes into becoming a really good actor. And I think the courtroom kind of rewards people to be stiff. And I think there's a stiffness that lawyers possess, and I sometimes feel like I'm plagued with. Of course, I'm a hard critic of myself, but
Right.
that in acting, it is kind of anathema to acting, that you need to be fluid. And I think that people who I see that can surrender themselves to a scene and feel like they're connected to their scene partner don't end up being this way. So I think that some of the courtroom skills of seeming very regal or seeming very intellectual or professorial, while it may be useful in a courtroom, I don't think always serves me as an actor because the role may not call for that.
Okay.
Does that answer your
Yeah,
question?
it really does.
Did I answer it too well or too much?
No,
or-
it's perfect.
Okay.
Actually, it's a great segue into, and I know you probably have a million questions too, Dean, but it's a segue into a follow-on question here because one of the topics that I think you had mentioned backstage you wouldn't mind talking about is kind of tapping into that emotional vulnerability and some of the relaxation skills that you've had to learn and concentration skills and things I'm very interested in are techniques to, remember my dialogue. I have a terrible time at that. I mean, it's one thing to remember your dialogue sitting on the couch. It's another thing when you stand up and now you have to react, not just act, and hit your marks and everything else, and everything just leaves your brain. So
Absolutely.
emotional vulnerability, relaxation techniques, concentration, things like that. You mentioned those things as topics you might want to talk about.
Sure. So
It's a lot, I know.
a few of us, well, certainly Dean and I are in the same acting class, and you're in the same program. And I think that each class begins a certain way. People assemble, and I am one of the few people who try to relax. So I just stretch or some sort of exercise that make me forget that I'm going to be tense or uncomfortable, and then this may help me just get to the place I want to get to. So there are a variety of things, and I've brought in actually relaxation exercises to this skeptical group of people. Say, like, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to walk around in circles, and I'm not going to make animal noises, and I'm not going to do some of the ridiculous things you do. Okay, I'll do them because maybe it'll help. And so people end up being very interested in how can I escape from the four walls of my being into a place where I haven't gone, even if it makes me feel ridiculous. And I think that exercises, breathing exercises, or pretending to be somebody, or whatever exists, doing improvisational scenes, helps you forget that if you're too focused on yourself, how do I look? How does it sound? You're not going to be very effective, and you're not going to like it either. That's the other part. So if I can forget that I'm sitting here in front of two microphones with two people being studied, or in this room that's actually very cold, but I'm pretending it's not, to
Acting.
exactly. Then I think there's a way that you can transport yourself to a place that you become much more authentic. And so I like that. And one of the things that, Matt, you asked me earlier about emotional vulnerability, and I always have to take a deep breath before I say it, because I think in this day and age, men, I don't think, are always rewarded with that piece of wisdom or that exercise. I think for whatever reason, it's harder for men to admit that they seek that.
Right.
And I at least try to pull for that in a scene or with some of the work I'm doing. And sometimes it's effective and sometimes it's overacted. And so the idea of a lawyer trying to pull for emotional vulnerability, I think for me is a refreshing exercise, because I think lawyers are taught to be well protected. And I think that to the extent that you don't do that, you can connect with people. And I think that makes you more of an effective advocate. And maybe sometimes it could help you to perform a scene a little better than maybe you might otherwise. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes perfect sense. And I'll back up for a second, because you said something that was very poignant. You mentioned the idea that you brought in these exercises that sometimes people are resistant to. And I remember when you did that, I don't think I was outwardly resistant to it, but you hear about some of these exercises, and for some of the novice actors out there are classes where you walk in, and I think we've all heard stories. Exactly. And you go, how is this going to help me? How that helped me, one of the ways that helped me, is the idea that I feel just like you, when you go in and you're in front of people, whether you know them well or not, it's still intimidating. You're in front of people and you're handed 50 different notes, and you're supposed to retain, you might retain one or two of them, but you're handed a bunch of different notes. I'm a little more receptive to those notes now and just kind of go with it, because I go, oh, I acted like a giraffe last week.
Yes.
So, today I don't mind taking these different notes.
I even heard what our acting coach say the other day: if you're feeling ridiculous, you're doing something right. So
Breaks
now
you out
that
of
may
the
have been
shell.
that was probably specific to commercial work, some of it, but still.
I've been told that think of the thing that you would least like to do, and then do it. Now, of course, this mixed company, and you're going to be a little more creative and sensible. But if it means in this scene to do that, just to maybe break the ice for yourself, wouldn't that be awesome? I mean, who cares? So you try it a few times and it doesn't work. What have
Right.
you lost, except the idea that the experience of it is what you've lost?
Yes, or my dignity, but we'll continue.
Yes. The dignity is overrated, and
I agree.
and sometimes if you see somebody surrender their dignity, which really is just about vulnerability, and they end up embracing it, you may end up gravitating to that, saying that guy has really big kahunas to have taken that chance, and even if he failed magnificently, which is one of the credos in improvisational comedy.
Absolutely. And of course, I'm joking about the dignity thing, but it's the idea that you're willing to put yourself out there and have that out-of-body experience that Tom Hanks was talking about, because it's not all about you as an actor. You're playing that character. And again, you're not going to do what you do. You're going to do what that character does. But what's interesting about what I just said there is the idea that you can watch a courtroom drama, and I'm sure you as an attorney and anybody out there can think of themselves, it doesn't matter what you do in your daily life, but imagine watching it on TV and picking apart subconsciously. I wouldn't do that. That wouldn't happen. But for Hollywood and entertainment purposes, it does. So talk a little bit about that, if you can. How does it feel to see a courtroom drama and differentiate that in your mind? And maybe, have you played an attorney in anything yet?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yeah.
What was different about playing an attorney versus actually what you do in your daily life?
Well, that's a great question because I just did this in a scene and I felt like I was just being an attorney like I know every day. I couldn't break out of that mold. I felt like I was just at the job and it was hard to want to do something that would be more interesting or compelling without just changing it for the sake of changing it. So these learned behaviors are really hard to break out of. And I think if you have something, I'm sorry, I don't remember your exact question, but
Just the difference between watching an attorney, how they portray attorneys on TV versus what you would actually do.
And maybe knowing that they're doing that wrong, but I also know why they're having to do that because it's a
Right,
it's a
right.
movie.
Having that inside information, knowing, oh, they probably did that because maybe they needed it for camera
yes.
or they needed
need
it
to
for
cheat
dramatic
out or-
effect.
yeah.
So I think the difference is that watching, certainly when I watch great actors act in scenes where there are lawyers like A Few Good Men, which of course you would never see, that kind of riveting, powerful, intense, nobody really talking over the other person's stuff that you see in a courtroom. It was fabulous. And I don't know how they were able to get Tom Cruise to do such a great job and Kevin Bacon and all of it. I know it was a Rob Reiner director. So I think I think there are scenes that I see in courtroom dramas that are very electric and dynamic. And I think it sometimes is just a matter of maybe not knowing the law and knowing what really plays well. And I'm not sure how to answer this except to say, if you're connected to maybe the person you're acting with, your scene partner, maybe you can be a little freer than a lawyer might be in a courtroom. Maybe you're not wedded to a script that is about reading cases, because a jury may want to hear about a case, or a judge, but the listening audience in a scene is not going to want to hear somebody debate the principles of the law, which is a very important part of courtroom performance. So I think to the extent you get to lose that sort of dry as dust part of the practice, and you can be a little freer, maybe then it becomes a little more real. And I just, one other thing I do know, that in every commercial I see for lawyers, I don't know why they do this. It's really annoying, but they have to point. And for some reason, they think that's a power move. And I was telling my wife this last night, is just stop it already. It doesn't work. What are you pointing at? It doesn't make anybody any more interested in what you're doing. So put your finger down and act like you're pointing, and don't point. That would be more refreshing to me than what you guys are doing.
Now I'm going to see that every time I see a lawyer commercial, and
I
I know
am
exactly
too.
what you're talking about, and it doesn't work for me. So,
But the next step, the next logical question then is, how could you point? I'm trying to make this not sound like a dumb question like the rest of my questions. How would you point as an attorney without pointing? You know what I mean? They're trying to project a semblance of power there. What would you do actually in a courtroom to portray that sense of power?
Wow. Putting me on the spot.
well, you brought it up.
I know,
You
exactly.
now I'm like, that's
Way
a great
to go,
one.
buddy.
So it might be, I don't know the answer to that question. It might be asking somebody a rhetorical question that would embarrass them. Are you serious when you said that? Did you really mean that?
Kind of checking credibility.
Is that
a little
really
bit?
true? Can you look at me and give me that same answer again? That's exactly the same as pointing to me.
I actually would find that more effective
Yes.
than pointing.
It's a focused energy weapon, pointed right at them.
Right.
You know.
And I guess that would come back to the dialogue that's in that script too, and somebody's understanding of what you would actually do. I guess it goes back to the writers. Are there any writers that have that background? What sort of research did they do for the parts?
Well, you got to ask yourself, how would they portray that commercial if it was not visual? If it was just an
Right.
audio, radio broadcast, they don't have the benefit of the audience seeing them point. So how back in the day, they had to get their point across in a different way. And lawyers were certainly on the radio back in the day before television, I'm sure. So
Right.
Yeah, I would think it would be something that would challenge the listener, the person you were talking to, or something that would make the audience at home listen that uh, might be the same as pointing. It could even be that you were clapping. Can you hear me from there?
Yeah.
Now, that's pointing. I don't know. I mean, we could do a whole scene on pointing.
But that's where I think that experience comes in from an actual attorney and doing the research for the roles and trying to figure that out. You know, a lot of, again, this is a government-centric area, so I know that there are consultants out there for 3-letter agencies that talk with the film industry to say, this is how we dress, this is what we do, this is how we do things. I'm not aware of anything related to any other industries that work with consultants. I mean, I'm sure they have attorney consultants as well. You just don't hear about it as much. But taking a step back even further, when you decided to get into this, you had already been an attorney for quite some time.
Yes.
So how did your colleagues take this when you brought it up to them?
I try to be selective, and I may pick my spots to tell somebody, and I usually will tell somebody that I know well, and I certainly don't drop it on people because they might be impressed, although there's nothing wrong with impressing somebody over your interesting hobbies. So the reaction is varied. I mean, people tend to be very interested at first. Nobody asks the questions of why you did it and what you get out of it, and there are the personal questions, which sometimes is just a fault of commonplace conversations where people don't really ask you much beyond the surface, and they tell you a story about themselves. I'm not saying that happens all the time, but that is something I have a pet peeve about. And so the idea is that some people are very curious, and they want to know, well, where you go. People always ask, where do you go for that? And I love that question because it just tells me that they're interested. So I explained to them that there's studios and that there's a whole industry here in the Washington, D.C. area that's really designed to help actors develop their skills and their technical, their places to get technical skills and all kinds of aesthetics that are associated with the film industry that I didn't know about. So I tell them about that, and people tend to be very interested because they don't know. They think Hollywood, they think Los Angeles, they may think Chicago, and they certainly think New York, but they don't really think of Washington, D.C., and certainly the time when House of Cards and some of the other serials were very big here became more noticeable that there were actors here. But since then, I think that whole wave has kind of moved away, and I don't think people think about that in this D.C. area anymore.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. And we bring up time and time again that it's hard to get a permit to film in D.C. specifically. And then there are some tax incentive issues that we're facing right now that are going through the House and the Senate. So we're going to have some people that can speak to that a little bit more than certainly I can. But I think that might be part of it. I think part of it is the industry is kind of slowed a bit, not just around this area, but the DMV is certainly unique. So how did you find out how to get started? Did you go to somebody in this area and say, what are the websites to go to? How do I get involved? Who do I go for a coach? What questions were you asking, and who were you asking?
Well, originally, Dean, I just had an idea that this would be something fun and useful, and that's all it was. And I didn't know what to do with it, and I started typing acting Maryland, and there were these studios. There were some in the District of Columbia. There's one in particular. Can I name them, or doesn't? I don't have to name them. Anyway, there was a very good studio.
That's completely up to you.
Okay, the Theater Lab. The Theater Lab is a wonderful place, and so I took a few classes there, but it was Washington, D.C., and I'm in Maryland, so there was the drive was just too burdensome after working all day. So I certainly attended those classes, but I wanted to see if there was something in Maryland. Like there must be people out there that do this. So I just found a website, and I sent an email message and didn't hear for months. And then I got a call from the studio owner that we both know, asking me to come in, that she offers classes in her home, which is a studio, and that she teaches classes from her suburban Maryland studio. And I went to see her, and it was just so extraordinary that you could do that, and that there be people that were receptive. And then the community that I've surrounded myself with are just these genuine, earnest people. I did not find that in improvisational comedy at all. I thought that was way too competitive, like stand-up comedians, the rap is that they're too competitive. At least that was my experience. Acting seems to be a different vibe, that people want you to succeed. They're certainly competitive. Everybody in acting wants to be good. They want to get better. But I felt like people were very generous with where to go to try to get headshots, where to find an agent, where to look for jobs that you might want to get posted, to read for you. There's something called reading, where somebody will be a reader for you so that they can be the person off screen that reads your script to you. People will they don't even know you. They say, call me. I'll be a reader for you.
We talk about that a lot, and you mentioned that you're, as a musician, you didn't find that same vibe that you discussed in the music industry, and and in fact, it leads to a story where how you and I competed for a role. Didn't compete, but anyway,
it was
the music piece.
Yeah, when you mentioned that, it was the same thing, and I've told that story before, so I won't tell it too much again. But to hit the highlights, I mean, being in the music industry has not been the same experience that I've had in the acting industry, certainly around here. And I think this podcast represents the reason why, because it is all about networking, and everybody wants you to succeed. The music industry, for me, has seemed a little bit more
competitive,
very, very competitive, and you tend to, and cliquish. And that's all I'll say in a public forum right now. But as far as we're concerned, I found exactly what you were saying to be 110% true. This community has been very supportive. Matt and I went out for the same role about a month ago.
Independently, not knowing we did.
Not knowing we did. And once we found out, good luck. Yeah, I want you to get it. We both congratulated each other. Hey, listen, here's what I did during my audition. Maybe it'll help you. And there was no sense of rivalry. It was everything that we could do to help each other succeed. And that's what it's all about.
We both ended up with a role in that series.
Well, it shows that being generous yields its own rewards.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. And, being in class with you, I'm actually in, and we've mentioned Katie on here many times before. So we're, again, shout out to Katie Kalaki. We're going to continue to say your name until you're on the podcast. Katie Kalaki.
Capital Coaching.
.com. But that has been such a great environment for at least myself. I've been in classes with Matt, and you and I have been going together for a long time, and we've been scene partners.
Well, that's the most I've ever felt vulnerable in a long time. Just sitting in that room, and it's very low threat environment because you've only got 4 or 5 people in your class, and so you get to know them and get to be silly in front of them and stuff like that. But then every now and then someone from a different class will pop in. I know, Mark, you came into my class, so you get to see new faces, and you're like, oh no, a new face. I gotta perform now because he's in a more advanced class than I'm in. But then you realize, no, everyone's just here to help.
And you were really great.
Well, thanks. I appreciate that. I can't remember what I did, but Katie's very generous when you do something right. You'll know when you didn't, but
yeah, I tend to black out a lot when I'm performing in front of everybody, but there's a lot that you get used to. And that imposter syndrome, to bring that back up again, is real.
Oh, yeah.
And we've discussed this before. Katie's actually made me say, I need you to say this. I am an actor. She's very supportive. And it wasn't until I actually said that, the words came out of my mouth, that I thought, oh, I mean, at first it's, am I? And then it's, I'm doing this. I'm swinging. I'm taking a swing, and everybody else is in the stands.
True.
So say what you want about it, but I'm out here trying.
I agree with that 100%. I think that to claim it and mean it is very hard. But I think when you do, that there's a certain amount of power in it that maybe just filters down and you end up feeling like you belong there, that you're entitled to do this. And if you're entitled to do this, then maybe you'll be better at it because it belongs to you, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course.
Do you remember that moment for you, or was it a slow burn?
I mean, I honestly, I love being here, and I thank you guys for inviting me. I struggle with it. I don't know yet whether I'm able to make the claim that Dean just said. I certainly can portray that in this as if I did, but to be honest with you, there are moments. I will say this, that this isn't confidential, right? Good. Okay. So
Nobody else is here. Everybody walk away.
For studio audience.
Now that it's just us, feel free.
that there are moments where you really just feel like it is very natural, and I found that to be early on. After a few weeks or a month, I thought I got really good, really fast, and I thought I had this, and it was just that I was learning a lot very quickly. But then you hit a plateau where you just don't feel like you're getting better, or you know enough that you expect more from yourself. And then it becomes much more challenging and stressful because you feel like you want to get better, and then you end up either trying too hard or something else gets in your head. So there's this arc that begins with a quick rise and then it levels off. And I'm not really sure how the rest of the story ends, but it does end and it goes somewhere else. I'm just not sure yet. And so it's a story being told as I go.
Well, I think it's important to point out that you feel a bit like you have imposter syndrome sometimes, and you're still working at this, but you have an agent. And to get an agent, it's not as simple as sending an email and saying, "Hey, work with me."
True. That's true.
Send me things that you think I could be good for. They have to vet you.
They do.
They have to meet you. You have to perform for them.
That's true.
So can you share a little bit about what the process, and you don't have to name your agent unless you want to, but what was the process like for you as someone who is still trying to find their way to then getting a hold of an agent and performing for them and landing it?
So I was looking for an agent because I thought it would help me get jobs, because there is this black hole out there of potential job opportunities where you read about them and you submit and then nothing happens. Or I've even had live auditions. I even had someone tell me, you were excellent. That was great. And they asked me to read other parts. And they asked me to read 3 or 4 other parts. And I thought I nailed it. Crickets. I never heard a thing from anybody. I never even heard a rejection. So either they got lost in a snowstorm or they just didn't mean it. And so I learned something. Okay. It was a good experience. And so people are full of it sometimes. And this is what actors do. And they tell you stuff to make you feel better. So I decided that I might try to, it was a numbers game, to find somebody that would be able to find jobs for me, which is, of course, an agent. And then, so that agent was somebody I was introduced to, and they said, great, you'll have an interview on Saturday morning. They didn't say that you would read, that they wanted you to perform a monologue. They just wanted you to give them headshots and maybe a resume. So knowing the little bit I did, and from my acting teacher, she said, "Mark, you need to have a monologue ready." So I prepared one. And I didn't even mention that I had one. And she said, "Okay, well, I'd like to hear your monologue." I was like, yes, okay.
Nice.
I'm so ready for you.
Got it.
I
Yeah.
am so ready for you. So I did my monologue, and I thought it was pretty good. And so I said, "I want to do it again." She goes, "No, that once was good. You were good. It was fine." But to have that available to me, and then she ended up picking me to try to submit for roles, to have an agent, was very exciting. I mean, it was like landing my first job. And So it was very thrilling to be prepared and deliver and to get the part.
And I think that's the mark of a good coach too. And even to take it a step further, the mark of someone who knows that they don't know everything and realizes they need a coach, because a lot of people try to be self-taught in this industry. And I'm sure there are some, 1% of actors are able to just get out of the gate and land a big, I don't know any of them, but land the next big gig. But you have to start somewhere, and having that coach is instrumental.
It was a reinforcement that the universe rewards you if you put yourself out there. So I liked the idea of that, and it does make you feel good that somebody, at least for a moment, even now I'm compromising it, believes in you, that you have something to bring. Because if I was terrible, I don't think that she would have tried to spare my feelings to be my agent if she didn't think at least I showed some promise. So it was really exciting.
Yeah.
Has the agent led to a lot of opportunities you think you wouldn't have otherwise had?
I get a few from time to time. They're in Pennsylvania, so I keep waiting, and I've gotten maybe 2 or 3 different offers to submit.
Just cold calls to you from the agent saying, "Hey, this is
Yes,
something
submit,
we
right,
got
submit.
it." Okay.
So I keep trying, and I'm optimistic. And so, as both of you know, that you just try many opportunities, and you see that there's probably a 10% hit rate. I mean, that's what I've been told. There's a 10% hit rate. So if you submit, that means if you submit 100 times, you might get 10 hits. But that's a lot of effort to submit 100 times, because to submit for a part is usually takes a lot of time and practice. So it's a numbers game. And if you just keep your spirits up and try to devote your time when you have free time to do it, maybe something will hit. And I think just as long as you know it's a percentage game, that at least it'll keep you going.
And let's define hit. Is that a callback, or is that reaching the all the way back?
Well, I haven't booked a part yet, so
Well,
I'm
there you
going to
go.
say a callback.
Yeah, no,
A
I
callback.
asked that because we talk about what success mean. Success means different things to different people, and
Yeah.
callback is success.
Yes,
It is.
they love me.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It's an acknowledgement that you did something right.
Yes, I agree. Yeah, somebody's listening, and
Right.
somebody thought that I had something that they thought was worthwhile.
And for a million other reasons, you didn't get the part that you'll never know.
Correct.
So,
What would success be to you in this industry?
Great question.
And would it change? Maybe success is one thing, for the until you do different levels. Everybody's at a different level.
So I don't really have. Certainly booking a job or two, a part or two, would be a measure of success. That would be very exciting. That probably takes the cake. And after that, I don't really know. I don't think the script has been written yet. I think one thing that occurs to me is just feeling this sense of ease in doing a scene, performing a scene, reading and being involved with somebody in a scene or in an audition that feels like it's just very natural. Like I hear our teacher ask people, and I've heard her ask you in class, were you nervous during that scene? Sometimes people say no, but many times
I
sometimes
think I've
people
told
say,
her no and yes, depending on how many times she's
yes,
asked me. Yeah.
but if you can say, no, I wasn't
Right.
nervous, that's a lot. To me, that's a big leap forward, because especially if there's a camera on you
Mm-hmm.
and it's running, and you can say, no, I loved it. I mean, that would be, I'd mark
That's
that.
success. Yeah.
Yeah. I'd point for that one.
Yeah. Well, Mark, listen, we could talk all day and all night about this. Unfortunately, we're pressed for time, but we want to have you back on. We'd like to do a part 2, part 3, part 10, doesn't matter. If you would have us and come back on.
Be my pleasure.
Summing it up, where can people find you? Do you have a website? Do you have social media?
You could find me on Facebook. It's under my name, Mark Emden. It's MARCEMDEN. That you might see me on Facebook. That's probably the easiest place to find me. I think I'm not as public as some of you guys are, and I'm working on it. But that's my landing page for right now.
Is there an email address if a casting director sees you, or if somebody wants to find you from this, how would they contact you?
It's Emden at emdenlaw.com. That's EMDEN is my last name, and it's under my law firm's email address.
Okay. And you're okay with them contacting you there? I don't want to put out.
Sure.
That,
Yeah,
okay.
That's
All
why I
right.
said it. Yes.
Just want to make sure there's a way that somebody can get a hold of you, because I've had the pleasure of watching you grow, as I hope I've grown. But I think over time, you can only get better just by going and doing. That success for me is showing up every Tuesday that we can go is when our class is. So, Mark, it's been a pleasure, man.
Yeah.
Certainly appreciate it. Mark Emden, make sure you find him on Mark Emden Law, right? Don't send a bunch of spam emails. Make sure you hire him for many things. But also make sure if this applies to you, if this topic was helpful for you, if you think it's helpful for someone else, make sure you share, like, subscribe. We're on Spotify for audio. We're on YouTube for video. Give us a like. And if you'd like to be a guest, let us know. Let us know what you'd like to see from us in the next few episodes as well.
Yeah, give us some feedback. Put in some comments. Tell us what we could do better. And like Dean just said, give us some great topics to work from. We'll try to work them in.
We'll see you soon.